Welcome into episode 80 of The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tocek.
If you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you'll know that we're all about strong security, and our suggestions are geared toward keeping your digital data locked away from anybody else. While security is normally a good thing, there's one situation where it can cause a lot of headaches. That's when you're no longer here to answer your security questions or type in your password. Today's topic, what kind of digital legacy will you leave behind? It's not a subject that, we normally think about, but as we move more and more of our important documents from the physical world to the digital world, setting up a system for your loved ones to access that data in the event of your death will become increasingly more important. Items on today's list. Make sure your family can access your devices, store important information securely. Backups can be critical. Different service providers have different rules. And finally, we'll talk about digital property. So let's start at the very beginning. Making sure that your family can actually access your devices if you're not there to do it.
Yeah, well, this episode doesn't just hit close to home for me. It's actually drawn on some real situations I've recently encountered. My father passed away suddenly and unexpectedly a few weeks ago, and trying to get a handle on his digital legacy has been a trying experience, to say the least. So I hope that the information we provide in this episode will help you set up your own digital legacy in a safe and secure manner well ahead of time, so your loved ones don't encounter the same problems I've been facing lately when it comes to making sense of my dad's digital legacy. However, like we've had on the show before, he left me with some good stories to tell regarding security or lack thereof. So let's go from the top. When it comes to your digital legacy, the most important thing is making sure that your family and loved ones will be able to access it in the first place. So don't forget to provide a way for them to log into the main account on your computer. Same goes for the passcode to access your mobile devices like iPhones and iPads.
Hold on. Forgive me. I don't want to interrupt you, but I have a feeling I'm going to a lot during this discussion. You say make sure that your family can do that. This show, as we said at the beginning, has been all about making sure that nobody can. So when you say make sure that your family can, what ways do you suggest? Like, coming from where you are right now, wow, I wish this was something I could do easily. What would have been a way that you would have suggested?
I guess the way I would suggest it would be probably either writing down the account password in putting in your safe deposit box or providing it to the lawyer. I know there's kind of things we normally would say, hey, don't write this down. But that's when we say don't write it down, we're kind of talking about, don't write down a sticky note on your desk. When you're talking about what's considered a more secure location, like your lawyer's office or a lockbox, a safe deposit box at the bank, that's a little different. Basically, you don't want your family trying to guess their way in, especially with passcodes. It's not only time consuming, especially on iOS devices where it makes you wait longer and longer in between each incorrect attempt. If it's set up in a certain way, it can be that it wipes the device entirely after too many incorrect tries. So also in that event, if a device gets wiped, if your family doesn't have access to a recent backup of that device, that could mean they'd lose access to important information as well as nostalgia like photos.
Question. Is there a way to tell if they've had the auto wipe feature after so many tries, when they fail entering that passcode?
Yeah, apparently not. I kind of wish I had known ahead of time. I found that out the hard way. And luckily, it was an older iPad that we do have a backup of. And I kind of was hedging my bets. And it turns out that none of the potential passcodes that we thought or that were written down or anything like that have worked so far. So I was trying on an older device in the event that it didn't work. So yeah, still haven't figured that one out. But it did not tell me it was about to wipe the device. It just was taking, it would say you have to wait 5 minutes before entering the next passcode. You have to wait 15 minutes. You have to wait an hour. And all of a sudden, it just rebooted the device and had the little progress bar. And I said, oh, crap. And yeah, it wiped the device. And then it's activation locked and, I'd have to So whatever. It's just an old iPad. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm really glad I checked on a not so important device first. So, as I was just saying, it's not a good idea from a security standpoint to just scribble your login information down on a sticky note and slap it on your desk. But writing it down is important in a situation like this. In my personal example, my father had previously shared his password with me in case of emergencies, but that was years ago, and I had a hard time remembering exactly what it was. And in the end, it didn't matter because he wasn't using that password anymore anyway. I guess I'll cut ahead in the story a little bit. My grandma did end up having his actual login password. He did write it down for her before he left for his vacation that he never came back from. But she misplaced the piece of paper, and she found it later, but this was after a bunch of effort. So I did get into the computer before I knew the password. Thankfully, there was a backup drive and Spotlight, and I did a Spotlight search for the old password I did remember, or parts of it, and that led me to old emails. I think we might have mentioned on the show before that, sometimes you'll have a situation where a service provider online will send you your password in plain text, which means they're not storing it securely on their server in the first place, and that's a no-no. Well, thankfully, he had some of those old emails, and I was able to find some potential passwords and figure out through some trial and error and some guesses the right permutations of the right one to get access to the computer. And then my grandma found the piece of paper with the password on it anyway. So that was a day later, though. So, I mean, I was happy that I was able to get into the computer that way, though. But basically, the bottom line is write down the password to log into your computer, but keep it in a safe place. Again, with your lawyer or in a safe deposit box. But also make sure your family knows where to find it.
Other question here. So in this case, the iPad got wiped. And I've heard stories, and I know of stories where people have had their devices wiped. Is there any other recovery way? I mean, backup of it once you put a new device online and you restore with the old backup type deal? I mean,
there's a few possibilities. I still don't know yet if he has any iCloud backups. We haven't been able to determine that yet. I'm kind of hoping, because that would be for his newer devices. In this case, we do have a backup, an old. I mean, this device was a few years old, and it was before backups were encrypted automatically, local backups, and so we had a local backup that was made with iTunes of that iPad, and so that backup is one of the old unencrypted ones. So I can just restore any device with that, and kind of be good to go there again. So that's in this case, I'm okay because we have access to that data. However, if it was a situation where we didn't have the backup, that could be a real problem.
Not to belabor the point, but this is the kind of thing you do, and you have had these kinds of problems. So I mean, if you're thinking, well, I'll get to it. It sucks. I mean, it absolutely sucks because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. Nobody wants to talk about this stuff. Right now, I want to hang up on both you guys and go outside and play. But, I mean, it's important stuff to talk about as well because, I mean, you're a security-minded individual who knows your way around computers inside and out, and you had difficulty. So imagine the difficulty you would have if you're, me, or if you're the average John or Jane, right? I mean, again, every show we bring because we think it's information that you need. But this is seriously information that we all need, whether we want to think about it or not. Speaking of information, next item on the list, storing important information securely.
Yeah, once your family has access to your computer, they'll still need to be able to make sense of all of your files. And obviously, some files will be more important than others. But depending on how good you were with your digital organization skills, that might not be readily apparent to an outside observer. I know where my random work files are on my computer. They're not necessarily tagged as such. The folder names might not be very descriptive. They might be like nested in five deep in a folder. I know how to find them. I know where to get to them, but probably nobody else would if they sat in front of my computer easily. They'd be able to track it down eventually by searching with Spotlight or whatever, but it's not going to be apparent to somebody else. So, and this is something I need to get better at myself, but setting up a sort of digital filing system, at least for the important information, it would make things easier for everybody. In this case, we're talking about some specific things. And again, hopefully you're not using the same username and password for every site. In this case, it would have made my life a lot easier with my father's data, but that's not the case there.
So he used different passwords.
Oh my God. I got more stories about that. So, if you've been following the best practices for creating strong passwords, they won't be anything that's easy to guess, even for your family members. And for that reason, it's really important to provide a single location to securely store those passwords if your loved ones need to access them in the event of your death or even an incapacitating illness. We don't have to just say this only is after you're dead. You just might be in a coma and your family might need access to your stuff. So the stuff you'll want to store securely is all of your passwords, your login information, account numbers, credit card numbers, all of that stuff. But it needs to be stored in a secure manner. You don't want to be making, it's a plain text document of this data, sticking on your desktop, and then magically get infected with a piece of malware through an infected update server, and boom, the bad guys have all of your information. You want to make sure you're doing it in a secure way. There are a few options you can go with, but again, remember to provide a way for your family to access that information. In my dad's case, so we got into the computer, and on his desktop he has a spreadsheet file called Password Database. And I opened it up and I'm like, okay, cool. And he had one that was password protected with the same password as the computer. So that was, cool. Okay, we got access to that. The other one was just plain text, no password. And it's a list of sites and usernames. And instead of passwords, he gave himself like partial passwords, like the first character, ... some character from the middle, ... and the last character.
A little reminder.
So, yeah, it was a reminder for him, which is fine, except now it's kind of this guessing game for me where I have to, it's like a puzzle. I have to take, okay, this password kind of looks like this. Is it possible that these missing pieces are this, and so I honestly have not tackled very much of it because it's going to be a real pain. Instead, it would have been nice had he used a password manager app, such as 1Password, which we've highly recommended before, because you can quickly and easily store all of your important information in a single secure location. Keychain Access actually has the ability to store passwords and login information built right into your Mac. It also has the ability to store secure notes. So it's storing more complex information, like using it like a text file, but still password protected, so it's not accessible to anyone who sits down at your computer or hacks into your computer or anything like that. Again, be sure the master password to unlock Keychain or your password manager app is on a piece of paper in a safe deposit box with your lawyer, somewhere safe, accessible in the event of your death, so people can actually get in the first place. If you are going to be storing important information like passwords on paper at home, which don't really recommend, but if you do, keep them somewhere logical, like in a fire safe. Not like my dad, where I've been finding pieces of paper, scraps of paper all over. I mean, like in the midst of random receipts, there'll be a piece of paper that has some passwords on it, and they're not dated. They're different. I found I've got handfuls of them. So that's again not the best way to store passwords. Another thing is, don't forget to update your records when you change your login info. If you reset a password, create a new account, something like that. Most password manager apps do take care of that for you automatically. But again, don't forget to do that, because if you bother storing that stuff in the first place, but you don't bother updating it, then it's not really going to help anybody out. If you have multi-factor authentication enabled for any of your accounts and have a separate physical authenticator that is not like an app on your iPhone, make sure that the physical authenticator is stored in a safe place that your family is aware of. That's normally not going to be the case. Some banks or secure access for work stuff would potentially have a physical authenticator device, but that might be more the realm of you're giving that back to the employer when letting them know of the death, not something you necessarily need to access an account. But it's just something to keep in mind if you do have that. And then there's a final thing to keep in mind is that there are some digital documents that should be stored securely no matter what, even if you're not preparing your digital legacy. A lot of people file their taxes online these days, and they get their tax return information as a digital file. Those documents can contain social security numbers, account numbers, other sensitive information. So your best bet in cases like that is to store them either as a password-protected PDF or as part of an encrypted archive. But make sure that data is also stored securely, because those are some of the documents that need to be kept for, I believe, 7 years for tax purposes. So those will need to stick around for a while.
Next item on the list is something I don't think we've ever talked about this before on the checklist. Have we ever talked about backing up our data?
Don't know.
Well, let's pretend like we haven't.
Okay.
Backups come in handy when you accidentally overwrite that important work document, but they can actually play a critical role in ensuring that your family doesn't lose all of your digital data. There are a few different situations where backups can really save the day when it comes to your digital legacy. The first and most obvious situation is one where your family doesn't have access to your physical device because it's gone for good. This could be the case if both you and your laptop went down with the ship or flew off with Dorothy and Toto in a tornado. Other times, your family might know where the device is, but won't have access to it for a while. This could be the case if your death occurred out of state or in a foreign country, or if the device is being held by the police as evidence in a criminal investigation. Finally, your family might have access to your device, but the device no longer has any of your data on it or any of their data on it. This could be the case if someone accidentally wiped the device by trying to log in too many times with the wrong passcode. So when it comes to making backups to preserve your digital legacy, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, make sure to keep those backups up to date. It won't do your family any good if you only remember to back up your important files once a year during spring cleaning. The easiest way to do so is to make sure the backups happen automatically, either with Time Machine or iCloud Backup. Second, make sure your family or lawyer knows where your backup drives are, especially if they're stored off-site. Same thing goes if you're using a cloud-based backup system. Finally, if your backups are password protected, make sure that your family knows the password or that you store that information somewhere safe. And this is one of those things you'll most likely want to physically write down on a piece of paper and keep it in a safe deposit box. The same thing applies for File Vault recovery keys. You'll want to physically print out a copy of the recovery key and store it somewhere safe as well.
And the reason that, at least with File Vault, the reason Apple recommends printing it out versus just saving it as a document on your computer is, again, in situations like this where we're worried about backups or recovery keys, it usually means that that somebody no longer has access to the device in question. Either the device itself is gone or there's something else wrong with it, hard drive crashed or whatever. So that's why these kind of are also some of those items that we go away from the normal advice of don't write it down. And in this case, yes, it's important to write this stuff down, print it out, whatever, as long as you're storing it somewhere safe and secure.
And maybe a good time to remind folks about File Vault and recovery keys, and we've done a whole shows on that as well.
And I know I started off that section or that item on the checklist by joking about whether or not we'd ever talked about backups. Checklist number 23, checklist number 33, and checklist number 35. Those cover secure backups, File Vault, and what to do should you forget your passwords. And then the bonus is actually episode 35, where somebody wrote in and said, really? You want me to print out that thing? You want me to write that thing down after saying all this time, don't write it down? So yeah, if you want to dive deeper into File Vault and the kind of topics we just covered, checklists 23, 33, and 35. And I'll remind you again later where to find notes for those. In the meantime, a lot of what we've been talking about actually is dealing with a physical device. Like, I've got a computer, I need to get information on this computer, and now I've made it possible for my family member to make sure that I can actually do that if they're no longer here, or made it possible for me to do that, if I'm no longer here. A lot of what we do now, though, happens online. Like, somebody's got a Facebook account, somebody's got a Google Drive account. talk to me about the different service providers that are out there and the rules for, I'm no longer here. Somebody needs to access that information. What are the options at that point?
Well, when it comes to your family actually using all of that account information that you stored securely in your password manager app, things actually do get a bit more complex. Depending on the fine print in those online terms of service that none of us ever read, your family and loved ones might not actually have a clear authority to access or manage some of your accounts. Some providers will grant your family access to your account data or be able to completely wipe your account once they have a copy of your death certificate, but others don't want to grant access even with proof of death. Additionally, there are federal and state laws here in the United States that might play a role in whether or not your loved ones can take control of your online accounts after your death. So you'll want to check with your account providers as well as your local laws when determining the legality of your family being able to access your accounts in the event of your death or incapacitation. Google has a couple of options when it comes to handling a deceased user's account. The easiest way is to use their inactive account manager feature. This is something to set up ahead of time. It allows you to grant a specific person access to your account in the event that you do not log in for a set amount of time. So you can say, hey, I want my wife or my kid to be able to access my Google account if I don't log in for 3 months straight. And you'll get reminders saying, hey, we're just checking in that this is still active. You've been logging into your account, so don't worry. But then if you don't log in for 3 months straight, it'll give them access. Alternatively, you can use it to set up inactive account manager so it deletes your account entirely after a set amount of inactivity. So if you have an account that you really don't want anybody else to see for whatever reason, you can have it set so it just gets nuked. If you don't set up inactive account manager ahead of time, however, your family can still contact Google to make a request for content from your account. But Google does handle that on a case-by-case basis, so there's no real guarantee that you're going to that your family would get the data, and they also will not provide passwords or other login details. Facebook has a way to set up an account as a memorial. It basically locks down the account, doesn't allow further logins. Family members can alternatively request that a Facebook account be closed entirely. So it really does differ from provider to provider. So especially with your email providers, you'd want to check their terms of service ahead of time, see if they have something like Google's inactive account manager or some other way to ensure that your family can legally access your account data after your death.
The last thing we'll look at on today's show is digital property. It's kind of funny because I was looking through my iTunes movies the other day. I've got 109. And I assume that when I'm gone, access to those movies goes away as well. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about? Are we talking about like books and movies and things like that? Or are we talking about...
Yep, all your online purchases for all those digital files. And if you thought things were complex when it came to simply accessing online accounts, when it comes to digital goods such as movies, music, ebooks, it gets even more complex. When it comes to your parents' old vinyl collection, it's pretty cut and dry. If you're the beneficiary in the will, you get the music collection. When it comes to their digital media, however, the same rules don't apply. Due to digital rights management, DRM laws, content providers generally restrict ownership of digital media to the original account holder and do not allow for the transfer or sale of their content to another person or account. Usually, the digital media is tied to a specific device, and the authorized device is needed to access the digital media. Now, when it comes to iTunes, there have been some reports of success in gaining access to digital media files by contacting Apple customer support, but it is by no means guaranteed. Another option would be to set up family sharing ahead of time in iTunes. This would grant access to shared media across your entire family without needing to share the same account. So family members should still be able to use their devices to play the purchased media files. And as more and more online media services switch to subscription-based models such as Spotify and Apple Music, the need to worry about what to do with individual DRM encumbered media files becomes less of an issue. With subscription-based digital media services, your family might want to check your playlists and make a note of some of your favorite mixes for nostalgia purposes before actually closing the accounts.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like, I've got a bunch of playlists that are posted online. They just go away. Sorry. Wow.
See, somebody is going to create a export of your playlists, or somebody probably already scraped it if you're sharing it. So there may be some site in some other country serving some cool ads on it that also has Ken's favorite mixes on it.
Yeah. Most of my playlists are really boring, actually. It's just like, here are some of my favorite They Might Be Giants songs, or my favorite Devo songs. But they're all... Well, the They Might Be Giants one's pretty good, actually. I took quite a bit of time on that. But, search for me on iTunes, and you can find that there.
Nice. Another thing, I came across, I think it was on LegalZoom, or one of the will services, and they actually talk about digital property rights. I mean, who are you going to will whatever your files to type deal? And again, it may not be as simple as it's what it says here type deal, having, when it comes down to all the licensing and everything like that. But it shows that people are starting to look at that type of means right there. So in that example, it lists like the account names and stuff like that to make it easier and point people in the right direction.
It's really interesting. It's well known. Go back to the show we did last week about Bitcoin. I mean, technology moves so much faster than the law. But it is interesting to hear that the legal side is starting to take notice of how we're all consuming all of our stuff at this point. If you want to dive deeper into today's topic, this is actually really one because, like I said in the middle of the show, it's not a topic that's fun, and it's not a topic that you necessarily are going to you're going to remember everything. But I mean, this will actually be a pretty decent checklist that you can find at the website for the checklist. And that website, of course, is securemac.com/checklist. I mentioned, too, a bunch of shows earlier dealing with File Vault and losing passwords and things like that. You'll find notes for every show that we've ever done and every show that's coming up on our website, securemac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.